We had the Nigerian
Morning,
market
Godfrey.
yesterday down 0.7% at a time when global markets were up. Here in the JSE, we had both the all share as well as the top 40 index up. Why are investors running away from Nigerian equities?
Well, I think that, you know, Nigeria is a frontier market, let's not forget. And, you know, we're in a very changeable environment right now. There's a lot going on globally. I think investors have a lot to contend with. You know, the domestic investor base are one, looking at what the internationals are doing, but they're also waiting to come to a place of, I guess, a step change in the dynamics as they see them in the Nigerian market before they take a strong view. And, you know, when we see fixed income yields looking better than they have been in the recent past, they are not under the same amount of pressure to pile back into the equity market.
At the same time, we're seeing it's the
caution.
usual suspects, if you like. The banks yesterday were the most under pressure from what I can see here. The likes of GTB, First Bank, Fidelity Bank, Bank PHP, Diamond Bank, they were all under pressure yesterday. What should we read out of the weakness that we're seeing out of the banks? Is there a sense that these stocks are overvalued at current values?
They're definitely not overvalued. I think that the thing is that, you know, the banking sector is the most liquid sector. You know, if we look at the sort of composition of the index, yes, you know, building materials makes up, you know, about a third, and so do consumer. But actually, in terms of liquidity and stocks that you can actually enter into or exit if you want to express a view or take profits, typically it's the banks. So you know, there tends to be some level of volatility. I think that I don't think the stocks are undervalued as they are. I just think that, you know, there is a general sort of sense of uncertainty with the market, and I think that until investors come to a place where they can see that actually there's been a step change in the underpinnings for Nigeria, then they will be relatively flippant or skittish, I should say, and look to take profits whenever they can, or you know, demonstrate this kind of lack of decisiveness when it comes to sort of taking positions in the market. I don't think it's a reflection of fundamentals. We've seen, you know, the tier 1 banks are trading at around an average of 1.1 times book, which is, you know, very low compared to peers. Now, admittedly, you know, the returns for the Nigerian banking space are behind, you know, others on the continent as we emerge from crisis. But I think that given all that we're seeing in terms of, you know, the banks paying attention to efficiency now, as opposed to just looking at income growth, as well as looking for sustainable avenues to grow income, I think that the trajectory for the Nigerian banking system is definitely, you know, on the up. But it's a question of degree, it's a question of speed, it's a question of momentum, and that will be determined by a certain amount of external factors, which I guess, you know, domestic investors are waiting to get some visibility on, and I think internationals are sort of reassessing Nigeria in light of a number of variables. Yeah,
but the other variable, of course, that we haven't spoken about yet is the issue of a new government. Now, for the markets, of course, what's important is the key economic ministries as well as the finance ministry. Why has there been a delay? Is this weighing on the market?
Well, I think that I guess we should know by now that everything always takes longer than we think it's going to. I mean, you know, we're still here talking about banking sector reform much later than we anticipated. It would have been nice to have the cabinet all sworn in by now, but, you know, the truth is that we haven't. I don't think there's a single factor that is weighing on the market. I think that, you know, this will help, that, you know, swearing in the cabinet and getting a credible mix of ministers. I think, you know, the conviction that perhaps there are a few strong members of the cabinet that are going to really drive through key change over the next 4 years of government will undoubtedly help the market. But I don't think that there's any single factor that we can point to say when this happens, the market is now going to go through the roof. I think that given that the dynamics of the market are quite different to what they might have been a year ago, you know, where we now have a kind of a 50-50 split between foreign and domestic institutional investors. You know, the foreign institutionals take a bit of time to build their case. I do believe that they're taking a fresh look at Nigeria. I think it's interesting that, you know, given that the CCI rule has been scrapped and internationals can now come in and out of this market on the fixed income, you know, government bond side, will take some time to seep in. It's not a single factor, but it helps to build the case. And our understanding from clients, you know, in the US and the like, is that they are taking a fresh look. But, you know, we need to take that in concert with the cabinet being sworn in concert with, you know, greater visibility on government finances, greater visibility on reserves, and, you know, seeing accretion return, and just getting a general sense that actually the choppiness that we had seen coming into the elections and sort of around the political process is now behind us, and there is a clear progression for the Nigerian economy, you know, going forward. And I think it will take all of those things together before we see any meaningful impetus in the market.
For sure. Let's talk lastly about the fact that you guys have applied for an Islamic banking license, and Standard Chartered apparently also has applied for one. Is there money to be made on the in Islamic banking?
Oh, Godfrey, if I said that I was an Islamic banking specialist, I would be misleading you. But I think that the key point to note is that, you know, Nigeria is a very underdeveloped banking market generally. You know, depending on who you ask, we have between 20 and 30 million bank accounts. I'm sure many of those even are dormant. And our demographic is such that we have half of the population 18 years or under. So there's a lot to come in the banking space. And there's enough for everybody, in my view. It's really about you know, understanding the various needs of one's customer, and then, you know, setting up systems in place that enable us to serve that customer. And I don't think that we are, you know, there's obviously a strong Muslim contingent in this country that may well be interested in pursuing that type of banking, and it's really about being there to provide a service that customers want. And I think that there's room for, you know, conventional and Islamic banking to flourish in this market if executed correctly.